Hi friends, this is your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to take a look at it. We're going to do a Dungeon Master's observation of Stranger Things, Season 1, Episode 3, Holly Jolly, and we're going to focus on one of the core four, and that is Will Byers, played by Noah Schnapp. So basically at this point, Will is in the Upside Down, but he's not there alone anymore. At this point, Barb is also in the Upside Down. And she is there because Nancy Wheeler really shafted her, right? Like, invited Barb to this party that she did not want to go to, invited Barb to a party that she shouldn't have went to. Nancy is, kind of like winding her way up to Steve Harrington and kind of thinking that Steve Harrington is something special, but he's not. Later in this very episode, Steve Harrington destroys Jonathan Byers' camera, and proves to be a very typical, cruel, abrasive, mean jock, right? And the people that Steve Harrington is around are even worse than him. He has terrible friends, terrible practices, terrible behavior, and Nancy is kind of Nancy, Mike's sister, is getting closer to him. We also get into Joyce Byers. So this gets really fascinating. So Joyce, so her son is missing. She is terribly upset. The whole town knows that he's missing, and the town has started to look for him. But Joyce is really driven. She's a really interesting character. She's kind of like a force of nature. And so she doesn't want to be, she's not unthankful for the town looking for Will Byers, but she also is not impressed that they haven't found. She's not impressed with effort, right? She's like, it's not enough that you looked for him. You haven't found him. She's upset with Jim Hopper, for not really taking this as seriously as he should from the very beginning. Jim Hopper at this point is beginning to understand that this is extremely real, and that Will is in a different space. And at this point, Jim Hopper begins to uncover information about MK Ultra, uncover information about the Hawkins lab, and he is starting to believe that the Hawkins lab is connected to Will Byers' disappearance. What gets really interesting is Joyce Byers then at this point decides to, this gets very interesting. So Joyce Byers then actually begins to try to communicate with Will Byers, and she believes that Will Byers is not on the planet Earth, which she's right. He's in the Upside Down. Barb's in the Upside Down. The Upside Down is really very real and starting to really impact Hawkins. And these holes, right, these gates that have been torn into the Upside Down from the Hawkins lab are starting to cause real problems. This gets really interesting. So Joyce now decides to communicate with Will Byers using Christmas lights, right? And immediately, right, she understands that this is extremely unconventional thinking, and Jonathan is not understanding, and basically people start to think that Joyce is crazy, right? And so, but Joyce, through force of will and through strong independence, says, I don't really care what the world thinks. I need to find my boy. And she persists and she powers through. And she builds this ABC, an alphabet on the wall of her home. And she actually builds a system to communicate with Will Byers while he is in the Upside Down with these lights, right? And I just thought this was really, really interesting. One of the things that's interesting is at this point, Dungeons and Dragons has stopped being played by Dustin, by Lucas, and by Mike. And one of the reasons why is this is something they do together, right? And you could tell that, like, they don't feel it's right to actually do this without Will Byers, right? Which I thought was really interesting, just to see how that actually unfolded. The other thing at this point is Nancy actually really realizes that Barb is gone, right? And she also then starts to realize, okay, I can't just be focused on my normal high school stuff. And she starts to connect with Jonathan Byers, Will's brother, and begins to like prepare herself to find Barb, right? And increasingly, you're getting Joyce Byers, you're getting Nancy Byers, getting and of course at this point also Mike, Dustin, and Lucas are all dealing with 11, right? And so what's happening is there's this burgeoning, growing understanding that our world is not the only world, that there's also this upside down, which I also think is kind of an allegory for Dungeons and Dragons itself, because the Duffer Brothers clearly have been majorly impacted by the Dungeons and Dragons world, by the Dungeons and Dragons game, and they're and their entire story is this allegory that for some people only one world exists, but for others multiple worlds exist, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to consider that, and we need to process that, right? Otherwise you're just like Mike Wheeler's dad, just like clueless, right? You don't really understand the shape of the world you actually live in. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing and have a fetch millennium.